Out for Blood. I am your co-host, Nathan.
And I'm Julie.
Tonight we take a journey through two mortals' sordid affair with the silver screen creatures of the night.
Actually, it's just a podcast where we watch a vampire movie and then chat about it.
This month we watch Interview with the Vampire. Emphasis on the, not a vampire.
It's so stupid.
Some Bernstein Bears level of stuff up in here.
It goes without saying that there'll be spoilers and some saucy language, so brace yourselves.
Now is a great time to pause, watch the film, then come back to our tantalizing insights. I do want to put some emphasis. This is a summary of the movie, not the book. So just chill out.
Which neither of us have read.
Hey, I've read like a good chunk of it, so.
Okay, whatever. So for those of you who remain uninitiated, Interview with the Vampire is the 1994 film adaptation of Anne Rice's hit novel of the same name. It's directed by Neil Jordan and written by Anne Rice herself. It stars the weirdly charismatic duo of Tom MiddleTooth Cruise as Lestat and Mr. Bradley Pitt as Louis, a pair of vampire lovers who snack on prostitutes, raise a child, gaslight one another, and wax poetic about morality. So Louis is an angst-ridden Civil War-era plantation owner with a dead wife, and Lestat is the salacious blonde drama queen who seduces and turns him. They move in together right away, but unprepared for life as a vampire, Louis spends most of his time throwing tantrums about his unwillingness to take a human life, despite the fact that he still owns like 30 slaves. In an attempt to fix their dysfunctional marriage, they adopt a porcelain doll version of Kirsten Dunst named Claudia, who eventually grows keen on Lestat's like coercive, abusive bullshit and schemes to kill him, but he just won't stay dead. And even after Louis and Claudia Free to France. Oh shit.
Flee to France.
They run away to France, and then they watch a bunch of shitty theater put on by Antonio Banderas in a bad wig. Their fates eventually catch up to them. Claudia is killed. Louis wanders through like the modernizing world back to Lestat, and Lestat still sucks, but then he kills Christian Slater, so like it's fine.
Makes it out.
There's like this impression that the film has this like really controversial like homoerotic content, and I was like really expecting it to be like vaguely gay going into it, but this is like the gayest fucking movie. Like
there's no subtext. It's all text.
Like when I say they're like a married couple, they're like fully a married couple. Like there's no ambiguity about it, and the fact that somebody would watch this movie and be like, I think maybe they're lovers is crazy. Like it's just straight up like that's it. That's what the film is. It's about some like it's like a shitty vampire marriage movie. It's some drama.
Yeah, all the drama.
How many times have you watched this movie?
I think with this viewing it brings me up to 3 or 4, probably closer to 3 would be my guess.
Okay, this is my second time, so we're like pretty much on the same level. It's kind of It's a very decadent movie.
It is. They went all out for it. Like, they committed to this movie, which is kind of surprising in some ways. I think, at least modern vampire films, there's a tendency to get, like, low budget and just, like, who cares? But,
oh, no, this is, like, a prestige film.
Yeah,
but
it's like a period piece about vampires. You got costuming and...
Yeah, and, like, Brad Pitt giving it his fucking all.
Everybody giving it their all.
This is... Kirsten Dunst's best performance of her entire career, like hands down. She fucking kills it, and she's like 12.
Is she Academy Award winner? I can't remember, but anyway, she should have won for this. Supporting actress.
She is so good. She's like the best part of the movie, and it's like such a shame that her character dies because she just holds it up. Like everybody else in the movie is so dysfunctional and shitty to each other, and she's like the only person in the movie who's like smart and gets it, and she's like, I'm just gonna eat people and call everybody out on their bullshit. Yeah, and the whole thing with her character is that she's like an adult woman trapped in a 12-year-old's body, and that can be like totally creepy, but I think this movie successfully does it not creepy for the most part, and It's like super impressive how well she carries herself like an adult, even though she's like actually
I was gonna say like props to her for being able to act like an adult trapped in a kid's body. It's quite the feat.
Weird and awesome.
And lots of exasperated Louis.
Oh, Louis.
Oh, Louis.
Yeah, it's like a drama queen movie to the max. Like there's no there's no chill at any point beginning to end. It's like just peak melodrama.
I don't think any of these characters are ever like comfortable for a second. It's just constantly like, oh, my life.
It's like totally true though, because I think it was Brad Pitt who was like, he tried to get out of the movie halfway through because he was so fucking miserable making it. He had to sit in the makeup chair for like, it was like a ridiculous amount of time, and they would make him hang upside down. Yeah, they would make him hang upside down in like the makeup trailer until all the blood like rushed into his face, and then they would trace the veins. So that's how they got those like realistic vein.
So they did that multiple times. They couldn't just like do it once.
No.
Take a picture.
It was like every time he had to do it a bunch, and he hated it so much, and he was like uncomfortable and cold and miserable like the entire time they were shooting, and he like called his agent and he was like, get me out of this fucking movie, and they were like, no. And then Tom Cruise was actually like cast like 3 weeks before production.
Nice. With some Viggo Mortensen stuff.
Yeah.
With my boy Aragon.
I want to
Aragorn.
Aragon.
Deep cut.
Gosh, I don't know. I forget who he replaced, but like, so Anne Rice was super involved in the production of this movie. And like she pretty much wrote the whole thing and was like really, really like hands-on up until like this point, like 3 weeks before production when they cast Tom Cruise, at which point she called the casting a crime and like completely distanced herself from the entire production. She like wanted nothing to do with it. She was so pissed off, which is like kind of fair.
I don't know. It's kind of a shame because it like worked out in the end.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So she, after the movie came out, she didn't like go see it. She like refused to go see it. And then somebody sent her a screener and they're like, bitch, watch it. And so she finally did. And then in classic Anne Rice flip-flopping fashion, she decided that Tom Cruise was in fact a god and the film was a masterpiece. She wrote him an apology letter, and then she took out a 2-page ad in Vanity Fair calling it like a masterpiece. She was like, everybody needs to go see this film immediately. It's perfect.
Like a little self-serving, but it's okay, man. You're fine.
Yeah, she's fine. She's fine. But yeah, so there's like a bunch of people considered for the role.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, this is one of the pillars of vampire fiction.
It's definitely a cornerstone. It's definitely a game changer.
Right. And so that it's almost the Lord of the Rings of its time. Those 2 Lord of the Rings jokes I made, which is terrible, but it's going to happen.
The Lord of the Rings of its time. How do you justify that?
So,
justify that.
Lord of the Rings was like one of the huge, big undertakings of fantasy adaptations into film, and this is like taking one of the huge pieces of like a sprawling vampire series, right? Interview with the Vampire goes beyond just Louis and Lestat. It like follows Lestat because everybody loves Lestat, and they're right. You're making these huge decisions about what could be a franchise and what should be a franchise.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I would argue that it is not quite to the scale.
No, definitely not.
But yeah, no, I can see that. It's definitely one of the bigger. I would call it a fantasy story for sure.
Oh, definitely. But vampires and fantasy, like vampires are their own thing in
my
my mind.
Yeah, but it's fantasy in 2 senses. It's fantasy in the sense that it's like fantasy because there's monsters in it, but it's also fantasy in the same way that like a Jane Austen film is fantasy. It's very like, ooh, romance, deception, murder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It took everything I had not to break out into deception.
Oh my god, okay. A little Lion King 2 Simba's Pride reference for all of y'all, because that's a good one. Okay, so I'm going to give you like a multiple choice of actors who could have been offered the role, who may have been offered the role of Lestat, and you are going to pick the one that you think was actually offered the role of Lestat. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm a hell of a test taker. Let's go.
Okay. So A, Johnny Depp. B, Daniel Day-Lewis.
I don't even know who that
C,
is.
Brad Pitt. D, Tom Hanks. And E, there's 5. John Travolta. Did I say 4 before? There's 5.
There's 5, and I have to pick one.
Yes.
That was so. Did all of these people audition, and only one of them got
They're just 5 actors. Pick the one that was offered the role of Lestat.
my gut says Johnny Depp. Like, I really feel like...
You would be correct, because it's all of them!
Okay, I was leaning towards that when you're... The question is multiple.
Okay, I want to re-emphasize some of these. Tom Hanks.
Yeah, he's a vampire.
Turned down this movie.
Oh, he turned it down
for Forrest Gump.
That's probably a good decision. I feel like that worked out.
Yeah,
for him.
yeah. John Travolta was supposed to play Lestat back in the 70s when they were like, producers were circling it back then.
John Travolta.
Oh,
man, I don't like that one.
Yeah, Anne Rice wanted Rutger Hauer to play him. Rest in peace. But he was like already too old to play the role. So, so we got Tom Cruise, which is crazy, but he's actually really good in it. I'm not a huge Tom Cruise fan.
Yeah.
And I love him in this movie.
He's amazing.
He is funny and weird and sexy, and it's like very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Brings Lestat to life for sure. All that like arrogance. And
the ponytail.
The ponytail.
I love him when he's just like wrinkly and emaciated and like dead. It's like, first of all, very good makeup effects.
Definitely.
And also just so good. It's like, it really drives home the like vampire-esque-ness of this movie, because without it, I think it would just be like pretty people in like embroidered house coats. Yeah. Just like whining.
And it's like for sure transformative, because at times I forget that it's Tom Cruise playing. And Brad Pitt to a lesser extent. I just feel like Brad Pitt looks like Brad Pitt no matter what you do to his face. Not to be too mean to Brad Pitt, but you definitely are like, oh my gosh, that's Tom Cruise. That's Mr. Top Gun himself.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm not going to make you do this with Louis, because you'll absolutely never guess.
Never guess.
So there's only two actors who were offered the role of Louis before Brad Pitt. Mm-hmm. And they were Cher and Angelica Houston. Because for a while they changed Louis to a woman.
Yeah, I was processing that for a second.
Because it was too gay.
Too gay.
That's how you know, like, that's how you know that it's like legit actual gay and not like controversial homoeroticism. Because they were literally like, it's too fucking gay for American audiences. We have to make Louis a woman. And I don't know, like...
I mean, it sounds fair for the 90s, right? 96,
yeah,
whatever
94,
this is. It's
94.
like,
I put Cher and Angelica Houston. That would be... Like, I want to see that version of the movie. It would be crazy.
Would you also put a woman in Lestat's role?
Who would you cast as Lestat?
96 Lestat or like current Lestat?
Anybody. I'm not going to put limits on it.
I'm so bad at actors and actresses.
I know you are.
This is going to be a problem.
Extremely bad. I can't think of anybody either.
The one that comes to mind is like, it would be hilarious to see Kirsten Dunst return to this role.
I actually love that.
I don't know if she could pull it off though. Oh man, what's the actress's name? She's in 28 Days Later, and she was Moneypenny in the new Bond.
Oh shit, hold on.
I cannot think of her name. I think it starts with an M. Maybe Michelle.
Her name is Naomi Harris.
Naomi Harris. I was close. One letter off in the alphabet.
Harris.
Naomi Harris. I think Naomi Harris could be an interesting choice. She comes with some swagger and panache.
I agree. I think that would be a good choice. I would throw in Cate Blanchett.
Cate Blanchett.
She's Carol.
I know she's Carol, but I
don't know who she is.
I am aware of Cate Blanchett. She's also in Thor.
Yes.
So
she is in Thor. Yeah. So,
you have any more juicy actor trivia for me?
Don't really. Claudia, all of the actresses who auditioned for Claudia are like really obvious, and probably all would have been really good. Like Christina Ricci, Evan Rachel Wood, and Natalie Portman all auditioned for that role.
Damn, Natalie.
Which it's kind of like, oh yeah, those are all like, that makes sense. But like Kirsten Dunst, man, she's so fucking good in this movie.
Yeah, she is. So if you're done with your trivia, I want to get into my patent pending VAMP assessment.
Okay, let's do it.
So VAMP for short is VAMP, obviously. Yes. Our V is for vanity, A is for appetite, M is for mortality, and P is for powers. And this is how we're going to be ranking and understanding the vampires of the movies we watch to better understand what makes a good vampire and what makes a really crappy vampire. So starting off with Vanity, kind of how they present themselves, I feel like this is extremely important to Lestat. Like it's huge, right?
These are like some of the vainest vampires. Like if we're saying Vanity is like on a scale from like really cares about their performance to like being like a nasty little like monster that lives in a cave, like a little grimy muddy man.
Yeah, but
like,
I feel
like these two guys are like fully on the left of that. They are not just like beautiful, they're like in the canon of the story obsessed with beauty.
But I also feel like their go-to hashtag would be woke up like this, because they they never really spend time making themselves look perfect, but they just look perfect.
I mean, kind of. They're definitely like shopaholics. That's like in the movie, which cracks me up so much. They're like constantly buying new clothes.
How are you going to cope with the throes of mortality?
Yeah, seriously.
With retail therapy.
Yeah, no other way.
But on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have Antonio Banderas in like the worst wig possible.
No, he's beautiful. He's beautiful.
Beautiful.
It is a very bad wig though.
Yeah.
But he is extremely sensual.
But overall, these vampires don't necessarily look too much like vampires from the outside. They are pale. They do have fangs. But that's kind of about it. You know, they're not...
They can like walk around on the street.
And blend in pretty easily. Like there's a couple scenes of them like sitting at like bars in New Orleans and just nobody even cares.
Yeah.
Doesn't even bat an eye. So overall, pretty vain. Let's go on to appetite. They can survive off of non-human blood. So traditionally vampires... human blood to survive. That's staple of the diet. Kind of debates about whether, depending on what franchise you're in, if non-human blood can sustain them. And our boy Louis just loves biting into those rats like a Capri Sun, just sucking them down left and right.
So many Capri Sun rats. It's like there's so many like just like dehydrated rat corpses in this movie. They're just like all over the place. It's so funny.
Yeah. And we don't really know to the full extent, at least in the movie, this probably explored more in the book, but just how much this affects Louis. Lestat definitely expresses some concern over his choice just to eat rats, but we don't know if that's a, like, you should be a better vampire and kill concern.
We know. It's literally about the aesthetics. Like, he's like, that's not cute.
That's not cute, I guess. Okay. Fine. So they can survive off of rats, but... for the aesthetics, let's fight some humans.
No, I think that's really what it is, because he's like walking around and he's like, I need a real Cajun woman or like whatever.
Yeah.
That's so stupid. But like for Lestat, it's like it's all about the performance and the aesthetic and the he doesn't have any reason to pick like beautiful women other than the fact that he's just fucking superficial.
For sure. There is one important caveat to the blood diet, and that dead man's blood is a huge no-no. Doesn't seem to kill them, but makes them extremely, extremely weak. So they can only suckle on a human for so long.
Yeah.
Can't let them die while you're drinking the blood.
Which I think is pretty specific to this franchise.
I mean, I'm not super well versed with like every single rule, but I feel like it comes up. It's not the most unique rule to vampires.
All right.
So, with that, let's move on to mortality. We touched on the dead man's blood, where it makes them extremely weak. This is actually how Claudia and Louis go after Lestat, by tricking him into drinking some dead man's blood and then slitting the throat. But overall, it seems like it's either impossible to kill these vampires in the form of Lestat, or they go down so easy in the form of the entire like Paris vampire coven.
So like fire, right? In this one, fire will kill them, which
not necessarily, because they light Lestat on fire.
Right, they do, but it kills like a ton of other vampires in this movie.
Yeah.
Like there's like 15 vampires that die by fire, like in an instant.
Yeah.
But then Lestat survives it because why?
Because of some sweet, sweet crocodile blood.
Yeah, I guess he just eats the crocodile and it's fine.
Yep.
Whatever. Well. Whatever.
There is the standard sunlight.
Yeah, sunlight.
How our poor little Claudia goes down
Claudia.
in her new mom thing.
It's like a weird plotline.
Whatever. But yeah, kind of sturdy, kind of not sturdy. I think kind of middle of the road for Mortality.
Yeah, they're like, you can kill him, just not Tom Cruise.
Yeah, not Tom Cruise. No mention of like stakes to the heart or anything like that.
I think they do mention that it's like in the interview section in the beginning that like the garlic and the stakes and the crucifixes are like
not
superstition. They're like not real.
Not a thing.
It's just kind of like one-linered away.
That makes sense. Oh. Let's move on to powers. It's briefly touched on the movie that like each of them has a unique vampire power.
Yeah, there's like mind reading for like a second.
Yeah, and Lestat is considered to be like the most persuasive. That's his vampire power. He can persuade anybody. And like you said, some can read minds, and that's about all we get into. So
I mean, there's also the like vampire sight, which the movie doesn't really explain, except like everything is heightened and beautiful, and sometimes statues blink at you. It's like really wild. It's like really weird. I guess the idea is that like it cannot be explained. It cannot be described to a mortal what it is like to have vampire sight.
That's why we invented language, by the way, is to be able to describe things. So.
I know, and then like also like cinematic language, which should be able to like give us an idea, but instead they chose to represent it by having a statue come to life for like a hot second. It's like very weird.
Yeah, that's strange. Some pretty other standard features to these vampires. They stay young forever. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much the age that they were bit at. They become the perfect form of
their
that.
Their hair grows back when they cut it.
Yeah. So, it's wild.
The details.
They do gain some extra quickness and strength. They're able to, kind of
There's that guy fast. Who can walk on, like, ceilings.
That is true. I guess that's his vampire power.
They don't talk about that, though.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man! Yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem like anybody can transform into bats or wolves or anything like that.
That's a shame. That would have been fun in this movie.
Could you imagine a little, like, Kirsten Dunst bat flapping around? Louis.
And she's like, Louis. Oh, Louis.
And overall, I feel like these vampires are, like, pretty standard. But I think that's an okay thing. Because this movie really sets the tone for a lot of, like, vampire fiction moving forward.
Yeah.
It kind of smooths out some of the rules of the original Bram Stoker stuff and makes it so like vampires can walk among us and you know.
And I think the thing with Interview is that it's like kind of a turning point for vampires where it's like the first time that, I don't know necessarily the first time, but the first like time in popular culture where vampires were the subject of the story and not the villain of the story.
Oh, for sure.
And they're meant to be sympathetic and they're meant to be romantic and you're meant to sort of be desirous of their drama and their lives, and it's very like ooh la la, which is like a huge tonal shift from vampires in the past, which are almost always the antagonist of the story, and they're even if they are sexy, which they often were,
it's part of their charm.
Yeah, they're
how they lure you in.
Yeah, but they were still like regardless, they were frightful, and there was always a hero who was immortal, like amoral, and Interview with a Vampire doesn't do that. It says the vampires are the heroes of the story. And I think that set the tone for like a million movies that came after it that like changed the way we think about vampires. And so I think it is, whether you like it or not, and whether it's too dramatic for you or, whatever.
Yeah.
It's definitely a cornerstone. It's a turning point for the genre.
Yeah. And I think it's one that you should definitely go and watch if you have the chance.
Yes.
If you've managed to get this far without watching it and you want to get into vampire cinema, this is one that you should.
Yeah, it's really fun.
It is.
It's a fun movie.
It is.
Yeah. All right. So the verdict is go watch this movie.
Yep. These are some middle of the road vampires, and it's a good time overall.
It's a good, sexy time.
Good, sexy time.
All right. Well, it looks like dawn is approaching. That's
going to be all for this episode. We hope you enjoyed your stay. Next episode, we'll be discussing the 1931 classic Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. Until then, I've been Nathan.
And I'm Julie.
For all our vampire listeners, remember, stay out of the sun.